The waiter placed a $22,000 bill directly in front of me while my sister-in-law Amanda's laughter echoed through the upscale steakhouse. "Cody, this is a family table. You can sit near the bathrooms," she had announced moments earlier, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness as 24 guests smirked at my public humiliation. Now, holding this astronomical check for the entire engagement celebration, I took a slow sip of my bourbon and smiled genuinely for the first time tonight. None of them knew who would actually be paying. I had arrived at Wellington Prime 30 minutes early, hoping this evening might finally bridge the gap that had grown between my family and me over the past 2 years. My charcoal suit was freshly pressed, my shoes polished to mirror brightness, and I carried a carefully selected engagement gift wrapped in elegant silver paper. The restaurant's warm lighting cast golden shadows across mahogany panels and crystal chandeliers, creating an atmosphere of refined celebration that should have felt welcoming. Amanda appeared at the hostess station wearing a stunning emerald dress that probably cost more than most people earn in a month. Her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo adorned with tiny pearls, and her smile seemed genuine until her gaze landed on me. The warmth vanished instantly, replaced by something cold and calculating. "John," she said, drawing out my name like it left a bitter taste. "How wonderful that you could make it." Her tone suggested the opposite. I extended the gift, but she made no move to accept it, forcing me to hold it awkwardly while she continued speaking. "I've arranged the seating very carefully tonight. You understand, of course, that the main tables are for immediate family and our closest friends." She gestured toward 3 large round tables positioned in the center of the dining room, each elegantly set with white linens, crystal glasses, and elaborate floral centerpieces. "Marcus and I thought you'd be more comfortable somewhere quieter, away from all the wedding talk and business discussions that might not interest you." Her voice carried clearly across the restaurant's entrance area, and I noticed several arriving guests pause their conversations to listen. She led me past the elegant main seating area, past tables where my cousins and aunt were already settling in with champagne flutes, past the warm glow of the central chandelier, and into a narrow space wedged between the restroom corridor and a bustling service station where waiters constantly rushed past with heavy trays. The table she indicated was barely large enough for 2 people positioned so close to the men's room door that I could hear the constant sound of running water and hand dryers. A single small lamp provided dim lighting, and the noise from the kitchen made normal conversation nearly impossible. "Perfect," Amanda declared, clasping her hands together. "You'll have plenty of privacy here." My brother Marcus appeared at that moment looking uncomfortable in his navy tuxedo. His dark hair was slicked back and his usually confident demeanor seemed strained. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away, focusing intently on adjusting his cufflinks. "Marcus," I said, standing to greet him. "Congratulations on the engagement." "Thanks," he replied quietly, his voice barely audible over the ambient restaurant noise. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Amanda looped her arm through his possessively. "We should get back to our guests," she announced. "People are asking about the wedding timeline, and we have some exciting announcements to make." As they walked away, I caught fragments of Amanda's voice carrying back toward my isolated corner. Financial situation, struggling since his business, and thought it was kinder than excluding him entirely. My Aunt Patricia, a dignified woman in her 70s wearing a navy blue dress with pearl earrings, glanced in my direction from the main table. Her expression showed clear disapproval, but whether directed at me or the seating arrangement remained unclear. She whispered something to my cousin Bradley, who wore a sharp gray suit and kept checking his expensive watch with obvious impatience. I settled into my chair, which wobbled slightly on the uneven floor, and tried to ignore the steady stream of restaurant patrons passing inches from my table on their way to the facilities. The contrast between my solitary position and the animated conversations at the family tables felt deliberately stark. The evening progressed with courses of expertly prepared food that I barely tasted. From my vantage point, I watched Amanda hold court at the central table, gesturing expansively while telling stories that generated bursts of laughter. Marcus sat beside her, nodding at appropriate moments but contributing little to the conversation. During the main course, a distinguished-looking waiter approached my table carrying a leather portfolio. His gray hair was perfectly styled, and his black uniform was impeccably pressed. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had served countless high-end establishments. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a low, professional tone. "I believe there's been some confusion about tonight's billing arrangements." He opened the portfolio to reveal an itemized receipt that made my breath catch. $22,437 for the complete evening celebration, including premium steaks, vintage wines, top-shelf liquors, and elaborate dessert preparations for 24 guests. "The restaurant was informed that you would be handling the separate check for your table," he explained carefully. "However, the system seems to have consolidated everything under your name." I stared at the astronomical figure, my mind racing to understand how this could have happened. The waiter waited patiently while I processed the implications. Around us, the celebration continued with increasing volume and merriment, completely unaware of the drama unfolding at my forgotten corner table. Amanda's laughter rang out particularly loudly at that moment, and I looked up to see her raising a crystal glass in what appeared to be a toast. Her eyes met mine across the restaurant, and for just an instant I caught something that looked almost like satisfaction in her expression. The waiter cleared his throat gently. "Will you be settling this evening, sir? Or would you prefer to make alternative arrangements?" I reached for my bourbon glass, taking a measured sip of the smooth amber liquid while contemplating the situation. The alcohol warmed my throat, but more importantly, it gave me a moment to think clearly about what was really happening here and what my next move should be. As I studied the massive bill, my eyes focused on the restaurant's elegant letterhead, Wellington Prime Steakhouse. The name triggered a flood of memories that had been buried under months of family drama and personal struggle. 6 months ago, that name had appeared on a very different kind of document, one that changed my life in ways my family could never have imagined. The memory transported me back to a glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown Seattle, where I had sat across from David Sterling, one of America's most successful restaurant entrepreneurs. Sterling's investment firm had been tracking my food delivery app FoodFlow since its beta launch, and after months of negotiations, he had made an offer that left me speechless: $12 million for a 60% stake in my technology. "Your algorithm doesn't just optimize delivery routes." Sterling had explained, his silver hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. "It revolutionizes how restaurants connect with customers. You've solved problems that have plagued the industry for decades." During that meeting, Sterling had mentioned owning several high-end establishments across the Pacific Northwest. "Consider yourself a family member at any of my restaurants," he had said with a genuine smile. "You'll always eat for free, though I doubt you'll need to worry about meal costs much longer." I had been too overwhelmed by the magnitude of his offer to ask for specifics about which restaurants he owned. Now, sitting with this $22,000 bill in my hands, the connection became crystal clear. I discreetly pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Sterling's personal number. My fingers moved quickly across the screen as I composed a text message. "David, I'm currently dining at Wellington Prime. Quick question about our previous conversation regarding your restaurant properties." The response came within minutes, faster than I had dared to hope. "Wellington is one of my flagship locations. Are you being treated well? I'm actually upstairs in the Cascade private dining room finishing a business dinner. Would love to say hello if you have time." My heart began beating faster as I realized the implications. David Sterling, the billionaire who had transformed my life with his investment, was sitting directly above me, while my family treated me like a charity case who couldn't afford a decent meal. I glanced around the restaurant with new understanding. The impeccable service, the carefully crafted menu, The attention to every detail all reflected Sterling's commitment to excellence that had made our business partnership so successful. Food flow had exceeded every projection, generating millions in revenue while revolutionizing food delivery efficiency for restaurants exactly like this one. Amanda's voice carried across the dining room again, and this time I caught more specific words: failed startup, driving for rideshare companies, and too proud to ask for help. Her audience listened with the fascination people reserve for gossip about family misfortune, their expressions mixing sympathy with obvious relief that they weren't in my position. My cousin Bradley shifted uncomfortably at the main table, his finance background probably making him more sensitive to discussions about money and failure. He wore a Rolex that caught the light every time he lifted his wine glass, and his custom-tailored suit suggested success in his own right. Yet something in his expression indicated he wasn't entirely comfortable with Amanda's public character assassination. Aunt Patricia looked increasingly distressed as Amanda continued her commentary. The elderly woman had raised 5 children during the Great Depression and understood dignity in ways Amanda never would. Her lips pursed with obvious disapproval, though she remained silent out of respect for Marcus. I typed another message to Sterling. Family engagement dinner. Would appreciate meeting you, but timing might be complicated. They don't know about Food Flow's success. His reply arrived immediately. Interesting. I'd love to meet the family that shaped such an innovative mind. Give me 15 minutes to wrap up here, then I'll come down to say hello. The weight of the impending revelation settled over me. In 15 minutes, my family's entire perception of this evening would transform completely. Amanda's carefully orchestrated humiliation would backfire in ways she could never have anticipated. I watched Marcus attempt to engage different guests in conversation, his discomfort with Amanda's behavior becoming more apparent as the evening progressed. My brother had always been sensitive to social dynamics, and I could see him recognizing that something felt wrong about the entire situation, even if he couldn't articulate exactly what. The waiter returned to my table, clearly concerned about the outstanding bill. "Sir, have you had a chance to review the charges? If there's any confusion about the billing arrangement, I can speak with the manager." "Actually," I said, setting down my bourbon glass, "I think there might be someone upstairs who can clarify the situation. Would it be possible to speak with David Sterling?" The waiter's entire demeanor shifted instantly. His eyes widened with recognition and perhaps a touch of nervousness. "Mr. Sterling, certainly, sir. I'll contact the private dining room immediately. May I tell him who's asking?" "John Matthews. Tell him the Food Flow founder would like a brief word." The change in the waiter's expression was remarkable. Food Flow had become a household name in the restaurant industry, and anyone working in fine dining would recognize its significance. He straightened his posture and spoke with newfound respect. "Of course, Mr. Matthews. I'll reach out to him right away. And sir, please accept my apologies for any confusion about the billing. I'm certain we can resolve this matter quickly." As he hurried away, I caught Amanda's attention from across the room. She was in the middle of another animated story, probably about wedding planning or her social circle. But something made her glance in my direction. For a moment, our eyes met, and I offered her a small, knowing smile. The expression of confusion that crossed her face was deeply satisfying. She had expected to see embarrassment, perhaps desperation, certainly not the calm confidence I displayed. She leaned toward Marcus, whispering something urgent while gesturing subtly in my direction. Marcus looked over at me with genuine concern, finally breaking his evening-long pattern of avoidance. Something in my expression must have surprised him too, because his brow furrowed with questions he couldn't ask from across the noisy restaurant. I raised my bourbon glass slightly in their direction, a gesture that could be interpreted as either surrender or salute, depending on one's perspective. In reality, it was neither. It was acknowledgement that the evening's true entertainment was about to begin. I excused myself from the table, ostensibly heading toward the restrooms that had been my assigned neighbors all evening. Instead, I turned toward the elegant staircase that led to Wellington Prime's exclusive private dining areas, where business deals worth millions were concluded over perfectly aged steaks and vintage wines. The upstairs corridor was quieter, lined with oil paintings of Pacific Northwest landscapes and softly lit by antique brass sconces. I found the Cascade private dining room and knocked gently on the heavy oak door. "Come in," came Sterling's familiar voice. David Sterling stood as I entered his commanding presence, filling the intimate space. At 62, he maintained the athletic build of someone who understood the importance of health and discipline. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his navy suit was clearly custom-tailored. 3 other executives sat around the polished mahogany table, their own impressive credentials evident in everything from their bearing to their expensive accessories. "John," Sterling said with genuine warmth, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "What a pleasant surprise. Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the genius behind Food Flow." The introductions that followed revealed the caliber of people in Sterling's inner circle. Robert Chen was the chief technology officer for a major software corporation. Susan Rodriguez headed strategic development for a national retail chain, and Michael Thompson managed investments for a prominent venture capital firm. Each of them recognized Food Flow's impact on their respective industries. "Your algorithm saved our company 18% on delivery costs last quarter alone." Rodriguez explained, her enthusiasm genuine. The efficiency improvements were beyond anything we had projected. Sterling gestured for me to take a seat. "John, these are exactly the kinds of results we discussed during our initial meetings. Food Flow has exceeded every benchmark we established." Thompson leaned forward with interest. "The scalability impressed us most. Moving from regional to national implementation without losing efficiency is remarkable for any tech startup, let alone one developed by such a small team." Actually, Sterling interjected, "John essentially built the entire foundation himself. The innovation came from understanding both technology and human behavior in ways that larger development teams often miss." I felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with humility. The past 2 years had been an intense journey from concept to implementation, and hearing these successful business leaders discuss Food Flow's impact reinforced how dramatically my life had changed. "Your technology helped my elderly mother during her hip surgery recovery." Sterling continued, his tone becoming more personal. "She lives alone in Portland, and Food Flow's precision timing meant she never missed a meal or medication schedule. That's when I knew this was more than just business efficiency." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Technology that improves lives while generating profit represents the best of American innovation. John, you've created something genuinely valuable." The conversation continued for several minutes, with each executive sharing stories about Food Flow's positive impact on their operations. Their respect was evident and deeply gratifying, especially given the treatment I had endured downstairs. Sterling eventually steered the discussion toward the reason for my visit. "John, you mentioned family. I'd love to meet the people who shaped such an innovative mind." I hesitated, knowing that bringing Sterling downstairs would irreversibly alter the evening's dynamics. My family's assumptions about my financial situation were about to be shattered in the most public way possible. "The situation is somewhat complicated," I explained carefully. "My family doesn't know about Food Flow's success. They believe I'm struggling financially, and tonight's seating arrangement was based on that assumption." Rodriguez's expression darkened with understanding. "Family dynamics around money can be particularly challenging, especially when people make assumptions." Thompson added, "I've seen successful entrepreneurs face similar situations. Sometimes loved ones have difficulty accepting dramatic changes in circumstances." Sterling's eyes sharpened with interest. "Are you saying they've treated you poorly based on perceived financial limitations?" "My sister-in-law seated me near the restrooms because she felt the family table was inappropriate for someone in my financial situation. The evening has been educational in terms of revealing character." The room fell silent as the executives absorbed the implications. These were people who understood both success and the way others react to it, and their expressions showed a mixture of sympathy and indignation on my behalf. "John." Sterling said firmly, "I think it's time your family understood exactly who they're dealing with. Would you mind if we joined you downstairs? I'd consider it an honor to meet your relatives and perhaps clarify a few misconceptions." Chen stood immediately. "This sounds like an important family moment. We should definitely show our support for someone who's contributed so much to our respective businesses." Rodriguez nodded agreement. Sometimes the truth needs witnesses, especially when it concerns treating people with dignity. Thompson was already reaching for his jacket. "Count me in. John, your innovation has benefited thousands of workers in our industry. Your family should understand the impact you've made." I felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness as we prepared to head downstairs. The revelation would be swift and complete, transforming not just this evening but potentially my entire relationship with my family. Amanda's carefully orchestrated humiliation was about to become her own public embarrassment. Sterling placed a supportive hand on my shoulder as we moved toward the door. John's true character reveals itself under pressure. Tonight everyone will learn something important about themselves and each other. The five of us descended the staircase together, our footsteps echoing softly on the marble steps. Below us, the celebration continued with animated conversation and laughter. My family completely unaware that their entire understanding of the evening was about to change forever. As we approached the dining room, I caught sight of Amanda at the central table still holding court, with her stories and opinions. Marcus sat beside her, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the ongoing commentary about family loyalty and financial responsibility. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and I felt surprisingly calm about the approaching confrontation. The truth was about to emerge, and with it a clear understanding of who my real family truly was. Our group of five approached the main dining area, and the conversation at Amanda's table gradually died away, as guests noticed the obviously successful business people walking purposefully through the restaurant. Sterling commanded attention effortlessly, his presence suggesting importance and authority that even strangers recognized instinctively. Amanda stopped mid-sentence as she caught sight of us approaching. Her confident expression faltered when she realized these weren't random restaurant patrons but individuals clearly associated with me. Marcus looked up with obvious confusion. His champagne glass paused halfway to his lips. "Excuse me," Sterling said warmly, addressing the table with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I'm David Sterling, and I wanted to personally meet the family of John Matthews." The silence that followed was profound. Amanda's face drained of color as she processed the implications of a complete stranger knowing my full name and seeking out my family. Marcus set down his glass carefully, his eyes moving between Sterling and me with growing amazement. "John is my business partner," Sterling continued, his voice carrying clearly across the dining area. "We've been working together on what's become one of the most successful technology innovations in the food service industry." Aunt Patricia's eyes widened with understanding and what appeared to be relief. She had clearly been uncomfortable with the evening's dynamics, and Sterling's words provided context that explained my calm demeanor throughout Amanda's attacks. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to meet the family that shaped such an innovative mind, Sterling said, gesturing to his companions. "These are colleagues who have all benefited directly from John's remarkable technology platform." Rodriguez stepped forward with a professional smile. "Food Flow has revolutionized our entire approach to customer service logistics. John's algorithm solved problems we'd been struggling with for years." Thompson nodded enthusiastically. "The efficiency improvements have been extraordinary. We're talking about millions of dollars in cost savings across the industry." Chen added, "I've been in technology development for 25 years, and John's work represents the kind of breakthrough that comes along perhaps once in a decade." Marcus stared at me with an expression that mixed shock, admiration, and perhaps shame. "Food Flow," he repeated slowly. "I've heard that name in business news reports." "That's right," Sterling confirmed. "John built the platform from concept to national implementation. We're now operating in 47 states with contracts from major restaurant chains, independent establishments, and delivery services nationwide. Amanda attempted to recover her composure, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. "How wonderful," she managed, her voice lacking its earlier confidence. John never mentioned any business partnership, perhaps because he's naturally modest. Sterling replied, his tone suggesting he was forming opinions about Amanda's character based on her obvious discomfort. John's success stems from understanding that true innovation requires humility and dedication, rather than self-promotion. Bradley leaned forward with genuine interest, his finance background helping him grasp the significance of what was being revealed. Food Flow is the company that secured the $60 million expansion funding last quarter. He said, his voice filled with new respect. $72 million, actually, Thompson corrected. The additional funding came from seeing the initial results exceeded all projections. The number hung in the air like a revelation. $72 million represented more money than everyone at the table combined would see in multiple lifetimes. Amanda's earlier comments about my financial situation now seemed not just cruel, but spectacularly misinformed. Sterling glanced around the table, clearly noting the reactions of each family member. "I'm curious, John. Why are you sitting over there instead of celebrating with everyone else?" The question was asked innocently enough, but Sterling's tone suggested he already suspected the answer. The entire table shifted uncomfortably as they realized the successful businessman was questioning their seating arrangement. There was some confusion about the evening's organization. I replied diplomatically, though my restraint was probably more generous than Amanda deserved. Sterling's expression grew cooler as he looked directly at Amanda. Confusion about seating arrangements for someone who has contributed as much as John has to American business innovation. The restaurant manager appeared at that moment, drawn by the presence of his establishment's owner and clearly nervous about Sterling's questioning tone. "Mr. Sterling, is everything satisfactory this evening?" "Actually, there seems to be some confusion about billing procedures," Sterling replied. Apparently, there was an attempt to present Mr. Matthews with the check for this entire celebration. The manager's face went pale. "Sir, I apologize profusely for any misunderstanding. Mr. Matthews should never receive a bill at any Sterling property. He's a valued partner and honored guest." Amanda's forced composure finally cracked completely. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, though her tone suggested she understood perfectly and was terrified by the implications. Sterling studied her carefully before responding. "What's happening is that I'm learning about how your family treats someone I consider one of America's brightest business minds. The information is quite revealing." Marcus found his voice at last. "John, why didn't you ever mention any of this? We had no idea about your success." "Perhaps," I replied quietly, "because true character shows in how people treat others when they believe those people have nothing to offer." The quote, unconsciously echoing Sterling's own philosophy, hung in the air with devastating clarity. Everyone at the table understood immediately that they had failed a fundamental test of human decency, and the results would have lasting consequences. Sterling nodded approvingly at my response. "Exactly right, John. Tonight has been quite educational for everyone involved." The atmosphere at the family table became increasingly tense as Sterling continued his pointed observations about the evening's treatment of someone he clearly respected and valued. Amanda shifted nervously in her chair. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. "In my experience," Sterling said, addressing the table with the authority of someone accustomed to making important judgments about character, "true worth has nothing to do with bank account balances. John's integrity impressed me long before our business partnership became profitable." He gestured to his colleagues, who nodded in agreement. "We've all worked with incredibly wealthy individuals who lacked basic decency, and we've met people of modest means who displayed remarkable character. John represents the rare combination of innovation and humanity." Rodriguez spoke up with obvious admiration. During our implementation meetings, John consistently prioritized how food flow would benefit workers and small businesses rather than focusing solely on profit margins. That perspective is uncommon in today's business environment. Thompson added, I've negotiated hundreds of technology acquisitions, and John's approach stood out immediately. He asked more questions about social impact than personal compensation. Chen nodded thoughtfully. The algorithm itself reflects that philosophy. Food flow improves working conditions for delivery drivers while reducing costs for restaurants and improving service for customers. Everyone benefits. Marcus listened to these testimonials with growing amazement and what appeared to be genuine regret. John, I had no idea you were involved in anything this significant. Why didn't you share this with family? Perhaps, I replied carefully, because I wanted relationships based on who I am, rather than what I've accomplished financially. Amanda made one final attempt at damage control. We were just trying to be sensitive to what we thought was a difficult situation, she said, her voice lacking conviction. Family sometimes assumes things incorrectly. Sterling's expression grew distinctly colder. Sensitivity would involve treating family members with dignity, regardless of their perceived financial status. What I witnessed this evening suggests something quite different. The restaurant manager returned with a leather folder, speaking directly to Sterling. Sir, I've removed all charges from Mr. Matthews's account, and I've personally ensured that his preferred table for future visits will always be available. Thank you, Sterling replied, then turned back to the family. This brings up an interesting point about assumptions and consequences. He addressed Amanda directly. You attempted to humiliate someone based on incomplete information and prejudiced assumptions. The result reveals more about your character than his financial situation ever could. Aunt Patricia, who had remained silent throughout most of the exchange, finally spoke. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had lived through real hardship and understood the difference between temporary setbacks and permanent character flaws. Amanda, dear, she said firmly but not unkindly, treating family with respect isn't conditional on their bank account balance. John has always been a good man regardless of his business success. Bradley nodded agreement, his own embarrassment evident. I should have spoken up earlier. The seating arrangement felt wrong from the beginning, but I stayed quiet when I should have supported family. At least you recognize it now, Sterling observed. Awareness of mistakes represents the first step toward better behavior in the future. Marcus stood abruptly, his face flushed with emotion and obvious shame. John, I owe you a sincere apology. I should have defended you tonight instead of going along with arrangements that were clearly unfair. I accept your apology, I replied, meaning it completely. Marcus had always been influenced by stronger personalities, but his recognition of error showed genuine character growth. Sterling watched this exchange with satisfaction. This is exactly what I hoped to see. Family relationships should strengthen during difficult moments rather than fracture over perceived slights or financial differences. Amanda remained conspicuously silent, her face revealing the internal struggle between admitting wrongdoing and maintaining her social position. Her friends at surrounding tables had witnessed the entire conversation, making any admission of error particularly difficult for someone who valued appearances above authenticity. John, Sterling continued, I have a business proposition that might interest you. We're expanding our restaurant group's technology integration, and I'd like you to consider joining our executive board. The offer stunned everyone at the table into complete silence. Executive board positions with Sterling's company were legendary in business circles, representing both significant compensation and enormous prestige. The position would involve overseeing technology implementation across all our properties while continuing to develop Food Flow's capabilities, Sterling explained. It's work you're uniquely qualified to perform, and it would benefit thousands of employees and customers. Thompson whistled softly. John, that's an incredible opportunity. Sterling's executive positions are among the most sought-after roles in the industry. Rodriguez smiled with genuine pleasure. You absolutely deserve this recognition. Your innovation has already transformed how our companies operate. Chen added, "This is the kind of advancement that comes from proven results rather than political maneuvering. Your work speaks for itself." Marcus looked at me with newfound respect and perhaps a touch of awe. "John, this sounds like an amazing opportunity. You've clearly accomplished something extraordinary." Even Aunt Patricia beamed with obvious pride. "I always knew you were special, dear. Your parents would be so proud of what you've achieved." Amanda's isolation became more apparent as family members expressed genuine happiness about my success. Her earlier attempts to diminish my status had backfired completely, leaving her as the evening's clear antagonist in a story where she had intended to be the triumphant host. Sterling observed the family dynamics with the keen insight of someone who had navigated countless business and personal relationships. "It's remarkable how quickly circumstances can change when truth replaces assumption," he commented. The profound shift in the evening's atmosphere was undeniable. What had begun as my public humiliation had transformed into Amanda's exposure as someone whose character cracked under the pressure of perceived social superiority. Marcus stood quietly for a long moment, studying Amanda's face as she struggled to process the dramatic reversal of the evening's power dynamics. The silence stretched uncomfortably until he spoke with a clarity and strength I hadn't heard from my brother in years. "Amanda," he said, his voice carrying newfound authority, "I need to speak with you privately." They moved to a quieter corner of the restaurant, but their body language told the story even without audible words. Marcus spoke seriously, while Amanda gestured frantically, her composure completely shattered. After several minutes of intense conversation, they returned to the table where Marcus's expression had transformed from conflict to resolution. "I have an announcement to make," Marcus said, addressing not just our table, but the surrounding guests who had witnessed the evening's drama. "After careful consideration of tonight's events, I've realized that Amanda and I have fundamental differences in our values and treatment of family." Amanda's face went white as she grasped the implications of his words. "Marcus, you're upset about a simple misunderstanding," she said desperately. "We can discuss this privately later." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Marcus replied firmly. "This was a deliberate choice to humiliate my brother based on assumptions about his financial situation. I cannot marry someone whose character is revealed so clearly under these circumstances." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, placing it gently on the table in front of Amanda. The engagement ring that had sparkled on her finger minutes earlier now sat between them like evidence of a failed relationship. "I'm ending our engagement," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his decision. "Tonight showed me who I would be becoming if I continued down this path, and that person isn't someone I can respect." The shock rippled through the assembled guests like a wave. Amanda stared at the ring box as if it might somehow reverse the humiliation of the past hour, but no amount of wishful thinking could undo the choices she had made throughout the evening. "You're making a terrible mistake," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Your brother orchestrated this entire situation to embarrass me." Sterling, who had observed the entire exchange with keen interest, stepped forward. "Young lady, your brother-in-law didn't orchestrate anything. I happened to be dining upstairs and came down to meet him when I learned he was here. Your accusations reveal more desperation than logic." Amanda's friends at the nearby tables began quietly gathering their belongings, clearly uncomfortable with the public dissolution of what was supposed to be a celebration. Social embarrassment in their circle would be difficult to overcome, especially when the fault lay so obviously with Amanda's behavior. Marcus turned to me with tears in his eyes. "John, can you ever forgive me for allowing this to happen? I should have defended you from the moment Amanda made those seating arrangements." "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "You recognized the problem and took action to correct it. That's what matters." Aunt Patricia wiped her eyes with a lace handkerchief, clearly moved by the reconciliation between her nephews. "Your parents would be proud of both of you boys tonight," she said warmly. Standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Bradley approached our group with obvious relief. John, I owe you an apology, too. I suspected something was wrong with the seating arrangement, but I chose comfort over courage. That was wrong of me. Apology accepted, I replied. The important thing is that we learned something about ourselves and each other. Sterling watched these family reconciliations with satisfaction. This is exactly what I hoped would happen. Truth has a way of strengthening genuine relationships while exposing false ones. Amanda gathered her purse and stood to leave her humiliation complete and irreversible. The engagement celebration had become a public demonstration of her poor judgment and cruel character, witnessed by dozens of people who would remember this evening for years to come. This isn't over, she said, though her threat sounded hollow given her complete lack of leverage in the situation. Actually, it is over, Marcus replied with finality. I hope you learned something from this experience, but that's no longer my responsibility. As Amanda left the restaurant alone, the atmosphere immediately lightened. Conversations resumed with genuine warmth as family members and guests processed the dramatic events they had witnessed. Sterling addressed the remaining group with a smile. Well, this has been one of the most educational evenings I've experienced in quite some time. John, your family's character has been thoroughly tested, and most of them passed admirably. Thompson raised his wine glass. To John Matthews, whose integrity and innovation continue to inspire everyone around him. The toast was echoed throughout the dining room as news of the evening's revelations spread among the guests. What had begun as my isolation and humiliation had transformed into a celebration of authentic family bonds and genuine character. Rodriguez approached Marcus with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry the evening ended your engagement, but you showed remarkable strength in choosing integrity over convenience. Thank you, Marcus replied. I feel lighter than I have in months. Sometimes the most difficult decisions bring the greatest relief. Chen nodded thoughtfully. Personal and professional integrity often require similar choices. John's business success stems from the same character that got him through tonight's challenges. The restaurant manager appeared once again, this time with a broad smile. Mr. Sterling, I wanted to personally ensure that this evening's celebration continues appropriately. We've prepared special desserts for the entire party compliments of the house. Perfect, Sterling replied. This family deserves a proper celebration for the reunion that just occurred. As elaborate desserts were served and genuine laughter filled the air, I reflected on the dramatic transformation of the evening. What had begun as carefully orchestrated humiliation had become a powerful lesson about character, family, and the importance of treating others with dignity regardless of their perceived status. Marcus clinked his wine glass against mine. To new beginnings and authentic relationships, he said with a smile that reminded me of our childhood bond. To family, I replied, knowing that the word now carried deeper meaning than it had in years. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new Seattle apartment overlooking Elliott Bay as the morning sun painted the water in shades of gold and amber. The view was spectacular, but what brought me the deepest satisfaction wasn't the luxury of my surroundings, but the genuine relationships that had been restored and strengthened since that transformative evening at Wellington Prime. Food Flow had continued its remarkable growth trajectory, now operating across all 50 states with international expansion planned for the following year. The technology that had started as a simple idea to help restaurants serve customers more efficiently had evolved into a comprehensive platform supporting over 50,000 businesses and creating jobs for more than 15,000 drivers and support staff. My partnership with David Sterling had deepened beyond business into genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values about using success to benefit communities. The executive board position he had offered that night had opened doors to initiatives I never could have imagined, including a foundation focused on providing technology access to underserved communities. Most importantly, the relationship with my family had transformed completely. Marcus visited regularly, often staying for weekend meals where we cooked together and talked about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. The brother I had thought lost to Amanda's influence had emerged stronger and more authentic than ever. Our conversations revealed how much he had struggled with the pressure to present a certain image, rather than being true to his own values. Amanda's influence had gradually isolated him from family and friends who cared about his happiness rather than his social status. Breaking free from that relationship had been painful, but ultimately liberating. I spent 2 years trying to become someone I thought she wanted. Marcus had confided during one of our Saturday morning conversations. I lost myself completely in the process. That night at the restaurant, watching her treat you with such cruelty, I finally saw who I was becoming. Marcus had started dating again this time, choosing someone who appreciated both of us equally and understood that family bonds were precious rather than inconvenient. Sarah worked as a teacher at an elementary school in a challenging neighborhood, and her values aligned perfectly with the man my brother was becoming. Aunt Patricia had become one of my strongest supporters, regularly calling to check on both her nephews and expressing pride in how we had handled the difficult situation. Her wisdom about character and family loyalty had guided both of us toward better choices and stronger relationships. "Money comes and goes," she had told me recently, "but dignity and integrity last forever. You boys showed both that night, and that's what your parents would remember." Bradley had become an unexpected ally, often reaching out with business questions and investment advice. His finance background helped him understand the magnitude of Food Flow's success, and his respect for the accomplishment had grown into genuine friendship. The guilt he felt about staying silent during Amanda's attacks had motivated him to become more vocal about standing up for what was right. The ripple effects of that evening extended far beyond family relationships. Word had spread through Seattle's business community about the dramatic revelation at Wellington Prime, but the story focused on integrity, triumphing over prejudice rather than simple revenge. Several young entrepreneurs had reached out sharing their own stories of family misunderstanding and seeking advice about maintaining values during difficult periods. I had started mentoring promising startups, particularly those founded by people from challenging backgrounds who understood that success meant more than financial gain. The scholarship fund I established specifically supported young entrepreneurs whose families might not understand or support their ambitions, helping them pursue innovation without sacrificing personal integrity. Sterling and I often discussed the broader implications of that evening's events. "Character tests come when we least expect them," he had observed. "You passed with flying colors, but more importantly, you helped your family understand what really matters in relationships." The business community had taken notice not just of Food Flow's success, but of the values that guided its development. Speaking invitations arrived regularly from conferences and universities where young people wanted to hear about building businesses that benefited everyone involved rather than prioritizing profit above human dignity. My approach to employee relations reflected the lessons learned from experiencing both respect and humiliation. Food Flow's company culture emphasized treating every team member with dignity, regardless of their role or experience level. The results spoke for themselves. Employee satisfaction ratings consistently exceeded industry standards, and turnover rates were nearly zero. The technology itself had evolved to embody those same principles. New features prioritized driver safety and fair compensation while maintaining efficiency that benefited restaurants and customers. The platform had become a model for ethical business practices in the rapidly growing gig economy. Amanda had disappeared from our social circles completely after that evening. Marcus occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances, but she had moved to another city and apparently struggled to rebuild her social standing after such a public demonstration of poor judgment. While I felt no satisfaction in her difficulties, her experience served as a powerful reminder about the consequences of treating others badly. The most profound change had been in my own understanding of success and family. Wealth and recognition were gratifying, but they meant nothing without people who valued me for who I was rather than what I had accomplished. That night's humiliation had actually been a gift, revealing who truly cared about my happiness and who was simply impressed by external achievements. Standing on my balcony that morning, watching ferries cross the bay while the city awakened to another day of possibility, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for every aspect of my journey. The painful moments had taught lessons that success alone never could have provided. My phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "Sarah and I are making dinner tonight. Can you join us? She wants to hear more stories about your presentation at Stanford." I smiled as I typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. Should I bring dessert from Wellington Prime?" His response came immediately. Perfect. Sterling called yesterday to say hello. He and his wife want to meet Sarah soon. The continuing connections between all the positive relationships in my life felt like the most authentic measure of true success. Money and recognition were temporary, but the bonds formed through shared values and mutual respect would last forever. That evening's dinner with Marcus and Sarah was filled with laughter, thoughtful conversation about making positive differences in the world, and planning for a future built on authenticity rather than pretense. As we cleaned dishes together afterward, Marcus expressed something that captured the essence of what we had both learned. "I'm grateful for that night at Wellington Prime," he said seriously. "Not because it was pleasant, but because it showed us who we really are when tested. Now, I know the difference between relationships based on appearances and connections built on character." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It takes courage to choose integrity over convenience, especially when family dynamics are involved. Both of you showed that courage when it mattered most." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how dramatically life could change when people chose honesty and dignity over social positioning and superficial success. The family table where I had been unwelcome had been replaced by genuine relationships where everyone was valued for their authentic selves. The most important lesson remained crystal clear. True wealth lies not in bank account balances but in the character we display when faced with difficult choices, and in the quality of relationships we build with people who value integrity above appearance. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's true character was revealed under pressure, completely changing your relationship with them? How did that experience shape your understanding of what really matters in family and friendships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to support authentic storytelling about real-life challenges and triumphs. Subscribe for more stories about dignity, integrity, and the power of choosing character over convenience. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that true success comes from staying true to your values, even when others don't understand or appreciate them. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging and ultimately rewarding nights of my life. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions or assumptions, and sometimes the most difficult moments become the foundation for the most meaningful relationships. Until next time, treat others with the dignity you'd want for yourself, and never let anyone convince you that kindness is weakness or that character doesn't matter in today's world.